Welcome to the Business Herald podcast. The Business Herald is a weekly roundup of all of the top UK business news stories by email, social media, and this podcast. The podcast will feature some of the week's main stories, and we'll be joined by various business people on each episode to discuss the week's news and how it might impact a smaller business like yours. And hopefully we'll have some fun on a Friday too. I'm your host, Stephen Mather. I'm a lawyer for SMEs, and I help business owners sleep better at night by sorting their legal problems out. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Business Herald. Welcome along to episode 23 of the Business Herald podcast. This week I'm joined by two guests, Jess Shailes of the Ideal Marketing Company and Ben Blyth of Ryanair, an online mortgage broker. Jess is the MD of the Ideal Marketing Company, a full-service marketing agency which offers digital marketing services as well as PR, direct mail, copywriting and design. She has specialised in digital marketing for over 10 years, and in that time has watched it evolve from an experimental marketing option to an essential tool for the majority of businesses. Ben is the head of mortgages at Ryanair, a completely fee-free online mortgage broker for all kinds of property finance. He has spent his career in the building society sector and now works with estate agents to allow their buyers easy access and fee-free mortgage services. Ben's interests include sport, business and technology, as well as the housing market and personal finance. If you've not subscribed to the Business Herald free weekly newsletter, then do so, as it contains all of the week's business news and economy news. This week saw a number of interesting stories, but I'd like to start with Ryanair's Jab and Go advert being banned by the Advertising Standards Agency. They said that it was misleading, as the reality is that even with the vaccines coming, as the advert said, it was unlikely that any group would be able to go on holiday in the short to medium term without restrictions in place. Ryanair said it was a truthful and accurate advert. It argued that Boris Johnson himself said at Christmas said that with the vaccines coming, we could all look forward to a more normal Easter. So, Jess, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay, as our expert on marketing. What are your thoughts on this? Is it just Ryanair being Ryanair? Should the ad have been withdrawn? Was it irresponsible? What do you think?
I do think it's irresponsible. It's playing on, I think, emotions that are riding quite high, and I do think that it will, or it could, bounce back on them, or reflect badly in the future, damage their brand. Of course, as you say, Ryanair being Ryanair, I'm not sure that people have the highest expectations. If you think their position in the market is very much based on price, it is a race to the bottom. What's interesting is, I think that if we think about the market position, they are still very much competing on price. Whereas at the moment, I think the feelings that people are going to have around travel moving forward is going to be more about feeling confident that if things are cancelled, that they can get a refund, that they're covered. Those things are probably going to become increasingly important. I suppose if you're only spending £20 on a flight, then you can afford for it to be cancelled and not get a refund. So maybe that's the consideration. But I think the messaging is a really interesting, probably quite poorly thought through message at this time. It's like, feel the room, guys, Yeah,
and in actual fact, it was one of the most complained adverts of 2020, and perhaps that was because it was done at Christmas, where everybody, more people are watching TV, and we're all locked in, and we can't see a family, and we can't, go out, and we can't do this, and we can't do that, and Ryanair are kind of rubbing it in our faces and saying, book your holidays, when the reality of it is, we can't. One of the comments that I thought was true, and it's touching upon what you said there, Jess, which is usually bad marketing and bad advertising. One of the consequences to that is a damage to reputation, damage to your brand, and that's something that most people want to avoid. And one of the comments that I had on social media was, it hasn't damaged my view of Ryanair anyway, because it was so low that I wouldn't book them if that was the only alternative that I possibly had, because my experiences with them has been so bad in the past. Maybe Ryanair being Ryanair, and we know what their advertising's been like over the years, maybe they continue to play on that. We don't really care if we upset people, because actually we know that some people are just going to use us anyway because we're the cheapest, and we're going to get you there. Ben, what do you think? Do you think it was a responsible advert? Should have been withdrawn?
Yeah, I do. I saw your post on LinkedIn, and as I said at the time, I don't think it's for Ryanair to decide when it's right for people to go. I've watched the advert, and they specifically call out 3 or 4 different countries, and I don't think that Ryanair will be involved in their vaccination programs and be the ones to say when it's right to start flooding people into those countries. And so I think there is a high level of irresponsibility from the advert, and I do think it should have been withdrawn. I think that was the right thing.
Meanwhile, I saw rest in peace, Captain Sir Tom. What's his name? Forgot his name. Yeah.
More.
Now I'm doubting myself.
We'll edit that bit out. My brain went absolutely blank at that.
People refer to him as Captain Tom, though, don't they? I don't
Captain Tom. Yeah, that's where I got to that point and went, what's his surname? Talking about that. So apparently before Christmas, he was flown out, and him and his family flown out by British Airways completely free of charge to the Bahamas, I think it was. And obviously he's a national treasure, absolutely, and I'm not disputing that fact, but there seems to be perhaps a little bit of hypocrisy in the media generally on it, and I don't know where I sit. I feel slightly uncomfortable criticising, someone that's now died and raised 35 million for people that are in the NHS, but at the same time, it was technically a breach of the rules as well to fly out.
I think that's a new dynamic to society generally, is where we are, and even within families and couples, you now have this added dimension of how seriously people are taking sometimes the law, and sometimes there's it's not illegal, sometimes it's completely legal thing that somebody's done, or a lot of the time it's legal, it's just not the most responsible thing, and we've got to decide and make decisions about where we sit as long as everything's legal, particularly when you're thinking about mental health, being able to support each other. I think mental health is probably the main thing. Like, we should be staying inside as much as possible, but we also know that being outside, getting fresh air and exercising is really important for physical and mental health. So I feel like there's this added dynamic to everything that we're doing, or dimension, and that's settling and that's balancing. And lifelong friends are probably having really big struggles, and we're having struggles within businesses as well, where we all sit and what we feel is acceptable.
Yeah. We talk about talking about responsibility there. Actually, one of the requirements in the CAP code, the advertising code that the ASA enforce, is aimed at responsibility and the societal awareness of it. And perhaps Ryanair just didn't have that. Like you say, they didn't judge the room properly, didn't gauge it, and just put out an advert that just was just wrong at the wrong time. And maybe at another time it would have been more appropriate. But
what is responsible at the moment?
Yeah. And which is the problem, isn't it? And that's like what you're saying. Actually, some people, are sticking to the rules, quite rightly, to the letter of the law, as it were. Only go out once a day for their walk, and that's it. And essential shopping. And then there's other people that, are less prescriptive, shall we say? Where that judges, I don't know.
And also, I know someone I was talking to today who hasn't left the house in 5 weeks, and that far end inspection, where it's far stricter than is necessary, but that's where they feel comfortable. So there's that far end as well. Yeah,
no, that's right. So second story that I wanted to talk about, moving on, was this. A combination of 2 stories. So first story said that there were no black leaders in the top 3 jobs of any FTSE 100 company. And then a second story said there's been no material increase in female CEOs in the last 5 years. Now, I did a podcast special last year, November time, on diversity in the workplace. And if you've not heard that, it's worth listening into and checking that out. But Ben, what do you think? Do you think no material increase in the last 5 years. Do you think that's likely to change? Do you think that actually, there is now a movement towards being more inclusive and diverse in the workplace? Or do you think it's something that is so ingrained that it's going to take generations to get out?
I feel it's a bit of both. I feel there is that real ingrained element to it that it's going to take generations, which is sad, really. But I do think there's a lot of stuff going on which supports inclusion, I suppose, is the best word to look for to cover both stories. I think if you look at US politics, it was obviously a great thing for the Obama administration initially, for Black people to get into these powerful positions. Obviously, both him and the First Lady, and then we had this blip with the Trump administration where quite the opposite. And then here we are again now, 4 years on, and you've got Kamala Harris in a position of power as the vice president. In the UK, we've got someone like Priti Patel, quite high up on the agenda regularly on the television, certainly through the pandemic. But you've got that element of diversity. So I do think it will change, and I do think it has to start right at the top like that. And that's why I was disappointed, I think, in the Trump administration taking a step backwards. But it happens not just in politics, not just in business. I thought about this when it was a story, that I saw this week. And even if you look at things like Premier League football, if I can compare it to that, there's still a distinct lack of Black managers in the game, where many of the superstars are Black players. Some of the best in the England team, for example, are Black players. And a lot of the, you could argue that, okay, it's going to take time for those Black superstars to get to retirement and the point that they come on to then become managers. But actually, if you look at it, you've got the likes of Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard, who played in an England team with a lot of other Black players, and they've gone straight into high-profile management positions, and the Black players haven't. And I think the one that springs to mind, who is trying and is quite vocal about how difficult it is for Black managers, is Sol Campbell, who was part of the teams that played with Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard. And so even in sport, which so many people can relate to, we still don't see the leadership roles being filled by the minority, if you like. And it has to be happening, I think, not just in business, not just in politics, but in sport, and it has to come through. And so I think that's disappointing that we can't inspire ourselves from kind of any angle at the moment for leadership roles and diversity. There is a lot going on. I've been through programs through my career, a master's degree most recently, where probably a 50-50 split on this new program was, female to male, which was good because that was a plan which was in place to include sort of more female senior leaders in the building society sector, and so that was encouraging. And one of my friends on the cohort went on to, she left the sector, but she took a group diversity, well-being and inclusion leadership role elsewhere, stepping up from what was branch manager at the start of that program. So it showed that it was working. And I think things like the Women in Finance Charter as well in that sector really help. And so there is a lot going on, but I think attitudes are still a long way to go in terms of changing to get people into those senior roles.
Jess, as an MD of a company who is female, have you noticed that you're treated differently in any way in your kind of dealings with people that are, businesses that are maybe male orientated?
I haven't, and I think that's largely down to the way I was brought up. And I think also, I feel like these statistics represent the systemic nature of the situation, and that realistically, I still have always gone for the top roles and push myself. But I know that I think Sheryl Sandberg, I think it is, from Facebook, she was a Facebook COO or something like that, and she's written quite a bit about women. Yes, there is a ceiling, but also we have responsibility for turning up at the table, putting our hand up as often as men do, going for the jobs, because we're more likely to not apply for a job until we feel absolutely 100% qualified, whereas men on average they will do. They'll be
Yeah.
like, well, I could probably do it. So there is, but that comes down to how we were brought up, how we're made to feel that being ambitious and going for what we want is not feminine. So there is, I think if things are going to change, it needs to start right from when somebody's a child. It needs to start in schools, and unfortunately that does mean it will probably take a while before we see the knock-on effects, because people have to be given the opportunities and allowed to get into the right roles, but they also have to feel like they deserve them and that they're allowed to go for it and that they have a right to go for these positions.
Yeah, one of the points that was raised on the podcast, the diversity podcast that I talked about, was this, and it would apply in sport as well as anything, Ben, is that without, let's take a black kid, without a black kid seeing somebody of the, similar to, him and or her background at those high levels, be it, as a manager in a football club or a CEO of a, big FTSE 100 company, it's difficult for them to get that inspiration that that's achievable for them. And of course it is achievable for them, because it's everything should or ought to be on merit. And so everything is achievable, but it's just the fact that, well, they don't have that, that inspiration to aim for, and actually making that stand and saying, I'm going to do this because that's what I'm going to do is amazing, but it takes real character to be able to do that. And without that inspiration, you feel like you're working on your own. So I think it's an interesting, fascinating story, or fascinating subject to talk about. And something that I've really tried to learn a lot more about over the last few years, and really want to see and affect change as much as I can. But I do feel and agree, and I think my podcast, the diversity special that we did, agreed that it's definitely going to be a generational thing. But we're starting to see some changes. It's a shame we didn't see those changes, 20 or 30 years ago. But it takes time to get out of the system. But hopefully we'll get there. Right, moving on. £1 in every £20 in the UK is now spent on Amazon. Amazon's produced another year of record turnover, with turnover being £19.1 billion. It continues to have a significant impact on smaller businesses, obviously. But I also know lots of businesses that are doing really well from selling on Amazon. So, Jess, what are your thoughts on this? Is Amazon a big beast to be scared of, or is it something that we should, use more? What's your thoughts?
I hate this statistic, and yet I use Amazon all the time. It's probably 2 in every 20 of my pounds. I think going back to the point about responsibility, it's a lot of the shops right now, as we're recording, we can't go into. That's not an option. But even when we can, is the responsible thing to go into a shop or to order online? Once you kind of ravel that up in the environmental costs of delivery drivers and where things are sourced from, it's a very good point that there are local or smaller businesses now using Amazon. I'm not sure whether they get squeezed quite heavily, so that's kind of another subject. I'm not sure whether
they definitely do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's also kind of like people supplying in supermarkets. Well, the volume's great, but the profit is squeezed to the point where they might go out of business by working with these big companies. Amazon is starting to remind me a bit of that big company in WALL-E. I don't know how to say, that film where we all where in the future, where everybody uses it. So I think we're kind of stuck. I think a good alternative that was that I remembered about is buy once. Oh, what is it called? Buy me once or something like that. And the point is that instead of getting cables and things like that are kind of falling apart, it's more responsible online buying where everything is really good quality. So a cable, if you buy a cable from there instead, it's something that will last forever, instead of knowing that you're probably going to have to replace it in a couple of years. So I think there's a balance to be struck between this giant who provides convenient, cheap, easy delivery services and trying to support the local businesses and the independents as well.
I've got to be for transparency reasons. I downloaded the middle of last year. I downloaded a budgeting app called Emma, and just to kind of see where the hell my money was going, and then it basically uses the open banking system, downloads all your bank account information, and goes back to when it can, and anyway, it tells me that I'm in the top 0.1% of Amazon spenders. Yay, me! I won a prize. Not something to be proud of, but yeah. I tell you what, though, making cardboard boxes, there seems to be an enormous amount of that. Ben, what do you think? Is Amazon just going to get bigger and bigger?
I think it is. I think the convenience factor is the biggest of all. And it was only yesterday I had my groceries delivered from Morrison's via Amazon, because we can do that now, and they don't charge. Whereas if I choose another supermarket for delivery services, Tesco, Sainsbury's, etc., there is a charge. But because I'm already subscribed to the Amazon ecosystem, that's free delivery, if you like, and therefore a benefit to me. I do think there are ways around it, and there are ways that you can use Amazon where you are trying to do your bit. So a couple of examples, one of which is absolutely free, is to use smile.amazon.co.uk, and that way you can choose a charity that you wish to support. Just having a look at their website now, supposedly as of November last year, UK charities have received £5.7 million because people are signing up to use smile.amazon.co.uk, which is effectively the same website, but a proportion of what you spend goes to good causes. And I think that's a really good way of using it. The other thing is, as has been said, there are small businesses selling on Amazon, and I try, if I'm looking for certain items, I'll try and see who is selling that. And if it's from Amazon and that's the only option, well, so be it. But in the summer, I bought a pair of golf shoes, and I noticed that the seller was actually a small business, I think based in the Northwest somewhere, I can't remember. So what I did is I purposely had a look to see if they had a direct website. They did, and I bought from there at the same price they were advertising on Amazon, knowing full well that they wouldn't have to pay Amazon because Amazon are big enough to cope without that transaction for me. And so, I've tried to change my behaviors ever so slightly with using Amazon to try and be a little bit more thoughtful, rather than support the giant, to give a little bit of support to the smaller guys where I can. And I think if we can, talk about that between ourselves and obviously on this podcast and social media and whatnot, the more people that sign up, the more charities benefit, and the more small businesses get that extra direct sale, which just helps them keep afloat. And I think it's the right thing to do is to talk about that.
So a couple of things there. One thing that frustrates me with the smile.amazon thing is it doesn't work through the app. And obviously most people, I certainly am, I buy pretty much everything through the app, because it's just on my phone and I go there and buy it. And it seems to me that it should be really easy for Amazon to just assign my account to the charity that I've, selected on Smile, and then say all purchases that Stephen makes, whether through the app or not, there's a charitable donation. And at the moment, that the fact that they haven't done that seems to be a little bit irresponsible. And I think, sorry, can you do that now?
Yeah, on the iPhone app, they've certainly allowed that, because I noticed it in the last few weeks.
Oh, okay.
In settings, there is a section that you can set it, and the last couple of purchases I've made have registered. So I think they've cottoned onto your way of thinking and joined the people for that.
That's good. I'm pleased that they've heard this and then time travelled back in the past and made it. That's good of them.
You're change makers, Stephen.
Yeah, exactly. And the other point on using small businesses. So this is just my knowledge of Amazon. I had a big dispute about selling on Amazon. I went to the High Court, and on the Amazon page for a product, usually we just click the same settings. It's like buy now, and you go for add to basket, and that's it. And they're the default settings. But just below the button that says add to basket, it will also say you can buy this from X number of sellers, and you click that link, and then it tells you who else is selling the product, what prices, etc. And that's where you can then identify the ones that are perhaps smaller businesses. and you can then choose to select them. And some of them might be, you might be paying 50p more or £1 more or something like that, or it might not be on prime delivery. But that seems to me to be a decent way of trying to support smaller businesses, which is what we're good. But I think if you are a smaller business, I know a few clients that are trading on Amazon, and one of them, desperately trying to steer away from trading on Amazon and push business to their own, personal website, but the figures just are massive. It's like £250,000 turnover on Amazon compared to 15 on their own website, and so it's really hard to do that and divert it. Jess, what do you think?
I always think of trading on Amazon or eBay as a marketing cost. And I think that's the best or most sensible way to, from a business perspective, particularly a startup, to think about it. It's a route to market in order to build an audience that you then try and take ownership of that relationship with. So I used to run an e-commerce website selling hair products to redheads and makeup and stuff like that. And we used eBay as the route to market. Whenever someone bought from our own website, the order value was 3 times. They usually bought multiple products. And it's trying to find a way without breaking the terms and conditions, because obviously eBay and Amazon don't like you taking clients that they've spent the marketing getting customers there. But when you send out a parcel, you can put a thank you note and a coupon if they come back to your own website, maybe a little keyring or something like that. So I would always see trading on Amazon or eBay as a route to market and a marketing cost.
Yeah, that's interesting as well, isn't it? About just putting something else in the package to get people coming back to you, personally. That's a good one. Okay, so my final question for this week is this. So a report came out, said that 36% of adults are now exclusively working from home. We talked about working from home on this podcast quite a bit, but they're working on average 25% longer hours. Meanwhile, this week's been Children's Mental Health Week, and on Tuesday was Time to Talk Day, and two matters that I'm really passionate about: mental health and well-being, and obviously it's really important. So my question to you guys is: what are your top tips for improving mental well-being while we're all working from home? Let's go to Ben first.
I think one thing I learned last year, because the sudden working from home culture came upon us very quickly, is just not to feel guilty for taking a break. We've all been conditioned to the 9 to 5 culture. Most of us tend to work in the UK, certainly in the services sectors, and the strict kind of 12 to 1 or 1 till 2 lunch hour that you get given. And so it feels a bit alien to take a walk at 3 p.m. or maybe turn the laptop on at 9:30 rather than 9 o'clock, whatever that might be. And one leader for one of my previous employers emphasised on a weekly call with all staff that actually he himself had taken a step back and gone for a run during the day when in the office he would and should have been working. And that resonated with me, and I think resonated with a lot of colleagues, to say, actually, if a senior leader is saying it's okay to go for a run at 3 p.m, then it's probably okay for me. And I think leaders of teams have a responsibility to ensure people are aware that they're entitled to do that, and you should feel guilty for taking a break. It's something that we've been so conditioned into doing differently. That, and I think the other top tip I would suggest is, we touched upon it at the beginning of the call, Stephen, when you said you had a couple of screens. I think is to kit out your desk the best you can, to make it comfortable. A lot of people at the beginning of last year were sent home with a laptop and expected to have somewhere to work. And when you consider the workstation assessments from a health and safety perspective that go on in offices, they're compulsory every year. Nobody's had that done at home, really. And so to suddenly sit on a breakfast bar or a smaller table on the laptop and stooped over where it might be hurting your posture or you're straining your eyes, etc. I think to kit the desk out the best you can, if you know you're going to be spending a bit more time there. Yeah. And I think flip on the head and be the responsibility of the employer as well. I think new ideas are needed from the employer to send people working from home if it is going to be a longer term thing. And I think they would be my 2 best tips.
I certainly, when I was setting up business, I saw an amazing desk, and I think it was like a space desk or something like that, and it was air function, and you can sit there, but you can tilt it back and you can lean the screen back, so you're almost kind of laying down, and you can chill. And it looked absolutely amazing. It was something that you'd imagine in NASA. But the boss said that was completely inappropriate, and that I should actually do some work instead of laying down. So thanks for that, wife. Jess, what do you think? What are your top tips for mental health and wellbeing?
Well, it's very much do as I say and not as I do at the moment, which is why I grimaced really when the question, because I know what I should be doing. But we have just made the move to become permanently remote working. So we've been working remotely since March last year, but it worked really well for us. But as like I said, trying to be a responsible employer, an important part of that has been making sure that the kit was available, that the right setup was available as much as it's possible. Like, you can't go into someone's home and muck about with it, so providing the support as much as is possible, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the future legislations around that kind of change. For me, the most important thing is getting out for fresh air once a day, and I agree with what you're saying, Ben, that kind of flexible working, if there's going to be a benefit to us working from home en masse, it should be, I'm not doing my best work right now, I'm tired now, or I can go and see my sister, or I can go and do this thing and be with the person right now, and it just happens to be at 11 o'clock rather than my normal lunch hour. What's the problem if you do your work? For some people, they'll have a bike ride for a couple of hours and maybe work a little bit later. As long as the work is done, I would rather if somebody work for 1 hour and be productive than 2 hours because they don't feel like it's appropriate, and not be productive because they don't feel it's appropriate to go and have a nap if that's what's needed. I think the bums on seats mentality is a product of the Industrial Revolution that has continued for way longer than is appropriate. And actually, when you look at productivity reports from other countries in Europe who have a much shorter working day, they achieve far more without having this 7.5 or 8 hour working day. It's not necessarily necessary to have that long a day in order to do good quality work. And I think with us working remotely, we'll see more of that, because we might see people like, well, actually, I've managed to achieve everything that you wanted me to a higher quality, but by maybe working later in the day, if that's your natural rhythm. And one of the conversations you were asking about females in the workplace earlier, and I think one of the things that I see women in business talking about quite frequently is following our own, or being more aware of our own energy levels, because they can be quite different and fluctuate more than men's do naturally. And this also might give us, not this working from home flexibility might also give women an opportunity to do better work, because we can tune into where we're at and whether we are doing good work right now, and whether we're better off just leaving it and coming back to it later, and kind of doing work that way. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm not sure I've actually answered your question about top tips. I think I've gone off on one.
I think we worked out why. It's because you're not doing what you should do.
Yes.
that's why you're not answering. You should kind of spend a bit more time out of the business and do some things that are a bit more fun, and spend time on yourself and do that kind of thing. One of the things I find really interesting about the whole working from home scenario is this: that the whole idea of a 9 to 5 and a 5-day working week was invented by Henry Ford, and the reason why he invented it. There was a change from being 6 days a week and effectively 12-hour days, and reduced that down, was because he realized that if people were just constantly working, they had nothing to aspire to, nothing to aim for, and therefore no one would buy his cars. And so actually giving people that opportunity to have some free time to be able to go and do something, it meant that actually they were then spending in the economy. That would improve the economy and get better. And I think actually that's almost the stage that would hit now, kind of, as you talked about, post-industrial revolution, the information age that we're in, and moving towards whatever the next one is, where people are so fatigued and tired by working and being on a screen all day, that perhaps they're not then doing the other stuff that they should be doing, or would be good for the economy, like going out and spending and, doing, playing sports, doing hobbies and that kind of thing, because they're all actually shattered. So the two things become intertwined at that point, which is, one, it's great for the economy for people to go out and spend and have hobbies and do things that, of their own me time. But it's also really, really important for the individual and their mental health and well-being that they do that as well. So again, going back to, being in a leadership role, I think it's absolutely essential that you have people like Ben's previous guy or woman, whoever it was, the boss, saying, this is what I'm doing. I'm okay with going for a run at 3 o'clock. And if you want to do that, then that's fine as well, as long as you're still doing all your work, and we can, no doubt track and do all of that. But it's important that people have given that flexibility, because I think there's nothing worse, and you guys will probably know this. There's nothing worse being an employee and taking a day off to do life admin. That is soul destroying. Absolutely is. But everybody does it, and it's probably something that people take 1 or 2 or 3 days a holiday a year just to do their admin that they don't get around to doing in their normal day, which is unbelievable, really. And that to me shows that actually businesses should be looking at working more flexibly, allowing people to work from home, leading from the top and saying, do you know what, it's okay if you don't start at 9 o'clock. If you want to start at 5 o'clock, that's okay. As long as the work's kind of done, and we'll monitor that. But it's more important is your mental health and well-being. That's for me something that I really passionately believe in.
I think, and we've probably already touched on this, I feel like this is the opportunity of this shift. So if we are going to take an opportunity from this whole shift, it is saying, actually, this whole 9 to 5 thing is out of date. And I'd like to see that changing. But that statistic that you said about people are working longer, working from home, is the opposite to what I would have expected.
Yeah. So
maybe are we really saying the message needs to be clearer, that we do trust you to be doing a good job, for leaders to be saying we trust you to be doing the work at home.
I think that working longer is because it's just easier. We're used to doing a commute and might be doing 45 minutes, an hour in the morning, same on the way back. We have that kind of free time. And so people are going, well, I might as well start now. And then instead of getting to 5:30 and going, okay, right, well, I'm going to go because I don't want to get too much stuck in traffic. Like, well, I'll just carry on working. Let me just finish this one job. And then it ends up being 6:30, 7 o'clock. And they're like, well, I'll finish now and do some work. So actually there's two things there. And that's, one is the self-discipline to be able to go, do you know what, actually I've done enough work today. And it's really important that I take some me time. And then the business side of things of actually, monitoring overworking as much as underworking, which businesses don't do. Because what we do is we reward people that have worked really hard, and we kind of go, you did really well, you've hit target, you smashed it, fantastic, here's a little treat. And actually we should be saying, you're working too hard. Like, don't carry on doing that. I want you to stop. And the classic example of that, and it kind of goes against I think the British culture, but in France, for instance, and I think Germany adopted the same thing, that they went, well, no, the working time regulations say you can only work this many hours. And so we're going to literally stop access to our systems at this point in time. So you can't do the work. Yeah. And that is, I think, really forward thinking, difficult for most Brits to take, I think, because we're like, well, I want to work when I want to work. Ben, what were you going to say?
Well, it's very similar to you. It's very difficult to control yourself if you're not being kicked out of an office, or like you say, you haven't got the traffic to avoid on your way home. And suddenly for a lot of people, what used to be the hub of the house, which was the kitchen where you be with your family and have dinner, is now an office as well, and it's very hard to start differentiating the two. But just on the point you made there about Germany and France imposing those restrictions, it's a bit like the tachograph for a lorry driver. If you get to a certain point, you have to stop and you have to rest. Yeah. And I think in some industries that's going to work, but you're quite right. For the professional services that for example the three of us are involved in, it's something that you can tune in and out of, at any point of time. And so if suddenly at 8 o'clock in the evening, I feel I need to spend half an hour doing something, if my access to a system is revoked, then it makes working a bit more difficult. And I find that might work the other way. So I think it could be industry specific to see that actually being effective in the UK.
And of course, for some people, that might cause them some stress. The fact that, something pops into their mind and they go, do you know what, I'm going to sort that out now. Oh, I can't because I've got no access. And that might actually cause some undue stress on that individual as well. So, yeah, a difficult one. But I think the overriding children's mental health. My daughter did a little video this week. Their slogan, their motto for this year is "Express yourself." And I thought it was a really nice one for kids, but it's so important as well for adults. To be able to take time out to do something that you enjoy, to do something expressive, creative. Even if you're in a creative industry, when it's work, it's not natural creative. It's not that kind of the same creativity as you sitting down and doing some, colouring or I don't know, playing a musical instrument or doing some sport or doing some baking or whatever you like and ticks your boxes. Whatever you can do to express yourself, I think is the main one. Great. So was there anything else that you guys saw that was of interest that you thought that you'd like to discuss? Ben, is there anything that you saw?
I saw the Zoom chaos. Where was it? The Handforth Parish Council Zoom chaos. So I'd just like to thank you for keeping this particular meeting in control, Stephen.
This is the one that the council Zoom call meeting that's gone viral. One of the chairwoman or something like that went a bit power mad. There was a bit of an argument. She kicked one person out, and then there was just a shouting and slanging match.
It's only the chairman who can remove people from a meeting. You have no authority here, Jackie Weaver. No authority at all.
She's just kicked him out. No, she's kicked him out. Don't. She's kicked him out. Don't.
This is a meeting called by two councillors.
Illegally.
They now elect a chairman.
No, they can't because the vice chair's here. I take charge. Read the standing orders. Read them and understand them.
I will wrap up. So Jess, Ben, thank you very much for coming on this week's show. Really appreciate it. And for the listeners out there today, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for downloading the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a review on your podcast subscription website. Do subscribe. And if you'd like the email again, visit www.businessherald.co.uk. Both the email and the podcast is released every Friday around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And until next week, thank you very much for listening. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
The Masked Singer is on this week, there's semi-finals. Have you got anyone else addicted to that?
We watch it. It means I have to avoid social media because there's just spoilers, and it's really honestly it's a rubbish program. But it's a good program, isn't it? And it's kind of I'm getting wound up by someone doing a spoiler for, and I'm like, well, that's it. It's ruined it now. Absolutely ruined it.